When is a good time to start reading the Star Wars Expanded Universe? Sukuigar, everyone, it's Nazo again. And if you are looking to get into the Star Wars Expanded Universe, here is, in my opinion, some of the best locations and spots to start. Now, the one question most Expanded Universe fans get when it comes to starting the Expanded Universe is, what is a good spot to start? What is a good place to start? And typically, it's a follow-up question in regards to, well, what are you most interested in? Which era interests you the most? Now, I'm probably not going to have time to cover every era and every single aspect with this video, but I will cover some of the most basic and well-thought-out starting points, in my personal opinion. So with that, let's get started. Now let's say, hypothetically, you wanted to start in the post-Return of the Jedi era, the Bantam era, as most tend to call it. Now, a majority of the first couple of fans would most likely sell you on the Thrawn trilogy, and while that is a really good starting point, personally I would start you as far back as Truce Bakura. It's fresh off the heels of Return of the Jedi, it takes place, a day or two after? And I think it offers a really interesting enemy and perspective as far as post-Return of the Jedi stories go. It kinda sets the tone for some of the strange and interesting adventures you'll be going through when you go through the Bantam era. Now, if it wasn't obvious, Truce Bakura takes place immediately after Return of the Jedi, and it involves an Imperial planet by the name of Bakura asking for aid from the now destroyed and broken Imperial fleet from Endor. But since the Rebel Alliance was the one that destroyed that fleet, they are now the closest answering call. So they go over there, and they find out that a group of aliens is sort of stealing the life energy from the inhabitants and using it to power their destructive war droids. Now, this novel is by Kathy Tyers, and it's also one of the first, not the first, that goes as far back as the original Marvel run, but one of the firsts to introduce the concept of extragalactic invasion that is plaguing the galaxy in the future. After Truce Bakura, I would highly recommend you move on to the X-Wing comic books. These are Rogue Leader and Rogue Squadron. Rogue Leader is a 3-issue series, and Rogue Squadron is a 39-issue series, if you count the half-issue, the special issue, and the handbook issue. And it's a pretty interesting series. It introduces great characters like Plur, Suntir Fel, and Nern Vakil, as well as Ibtisam. They had a very adorable romance, by the way, that sadly ends in tragedy in the series. It brings up characters that would later become big villains and staples in the X-Wing novel series, like Ysanne Isard and Prince Dalek Krenel. But honestly, it's a great little series. Interesting ideas pop up occasionally, and in my personal opinion, it's well worth your time to check out and read. Finally, we come to one of the big ones, the X-Wing novel series. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting to like this series as much as I do. And I really like this series. From Rogue Squadron all the way till Starfighters of Adamar, at least that's as far as I've read through these novels. These characters have been interesting, enriching, well-written, well-focused, and very well done. You've got great folks like Corran Horn, Tyria Sarkin, Vroot Sabinring, Garrick Face Luran, Min Donos, Ton Fanon, Wes Jansen, the names that they go on and on. It's just how many great characters there are in these novels. And the novels, I would recommend you read them chronological order. The first 4 focus on a plot line involving the taking of Coruscant and the I guess, somewhat ultimate defeat of Yusan Isard, because she pops up again later in another book. Spoilers, Isard's Revenge is the name of the title, so that should tell you everything. And it introduces a lot of just really amazing characters and well thought out plot lines that, while not perfect, are still really, really well written. So chronologically, it would go X-Wing Rogue Squadron, Wedge's Gamble, the Krytos Trap, and the Bacta War. After that, you would follow it up with the X-Wing, I guess you would call it the Wraith Squadron trilogy, in a sense. Because it's all about Wedge bringing up these group of misfits and ragtags, these folks that have completely on their last line, their last leg, and Wedge gives them a shot at redemption, a shot to fly again for the New Republic. And it's fitting that this group of ragtags happens to be under the command of General Han Solo, who is retiring as Falcon for a little while to handle a large New Republic cruiser frigate for a while. But it's ultimately fitting that he ends up being the head leader of this group of misfits and ragtags, because it's very much in the style of Han Solo, and a bit in the style of Wedge Antilles. You know how stubborn Corellians can be. And in this trilogy, they are up against a dangerous Imperial warlord by the name of Zinj. And Zinj is a bit of a portly fellow, but he is still incredibly well written, intimidating. He has an ego and a strength to him in a way. And the one thing I can compliment about this book trilogy by Aaron Alston over the previous 4 books by Stackpole is that Alston takes a lot more risks in that he invests you in the character and then, kills some of them. Which, again, shocks me, but at the same time, he got me invested, and these, rest in peace to Aaron Alston, these books are amazing. And in these books, Han Solo and the Wraiths go undercover and try to hunt down Warlord Zinj, his Imperial fleet, and his Star Destroyer Iron Fist. Well, it's a Super Star Destroyer, but, I digress. And they're just such great books, such emotional depth and character. And these X-Wing books are titled Wraith Squadron, Iron Fist, and Solo Command. So yeah, putting that chronologically is probably at least help you figure out where to go from there. After that, I would recommend... This one's kind of a controversial one to some, but I still overall liked it and thought it connected well to the Wraith Squadron trilogy. And that novel is The Legendary by the late, great Dave Farland, Dave Wolverton, whichever name you want to know him by, Courtship of Princess Leia. This book introduces the Dathomiri witches, the Night Sisters, the Rancors, the entire chemistry of the planet Dathomir was created by Dave Wolverton, and in my opinion, he did a fantastic job. He also created the interesting clan of people known as the Hapens, and I thought their little hierarchy was pretty interesting as well. And in this one, it's implied that Leia might not marry Han and instead marry the Hapen Prince Isolder, so that the New Republic can reap the benefits of the Hapen fleet in their fight against the Imperial remnant at this point. And it's... I don't know. To me personally, it feels like it would be out of character that Leia would even consider this. But, the story has to happen, and I think for the most part it actually works. And from Isolder's union with one of the witches of Dathomir, and most who've read the books probably know who she is, we got later on one of the best Jedi characters, in my opinion, Tenel Cod Joe. And for the next one, I'm kind of hesitant to add this one, purely because I don't think it's that great of a novel by Troy Denning called Tatooine Ghost. But it does offer an interesting perspective of Han and Leia trying to recover an old Rebel Alliance information painting that, believe it or not, the great Grand Admiral Thrawn is looking for, but we're not supposed to know it's Thrawn yet. But this book, Tatooine Ghost, also helps Leia sort of console the fact that her father is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, and she learns a bit about him, and I guess in that sense it's kind of interesting that she kind of makes peace so that she can have kids. Personally, it's not my favorite, but I still gotta recommend it because it does fit the story pretty well. Finally, we get more to the big meat of the franchise, the one everybody recommends you start with, the Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. Now, these novels are lauded for a reason. They're very, very well done, very well written stories about the Imperial warlord Grand Admiral Thrawn, the highest ranking alien in the Imperial machine, I guess you would call it. Working with a deranged clone of a dark Jedi by the name of Joruus Sabayoth, and this series also introduced everyone's favorite redhead and wife of Luke Skywalker in the future, Mara Jade, and sort of how their sort of love-hate relationship blossomed into something beautiful in the later books. And for those who, don't know the story, this trilogy is basically about Grand Admiral Thrawn and Joruus Sabayoth trying to kidnap Luke, Leia's unborn children, Jason and Jaina, who would later be born in the trilogy, of course, and trying to assemble a fleet of Imperial forces to destroy the New Republic so they can bring things back under the control of Imperial rule. And again, I understand why everybody would start with these, but personally, I'd much rather start with the earlier stuff, so that's why I'm recommending it here, and I think others should too, so that the big threat of Grand Admiral Thrawn has a bit more impact, because they've seen the New Republic conquer minor warlords and minor threats, and see just how much territory they lost in their war with Thrawn. After you finish the Thrawn trilogy, I would highly recommend you go to X-Wing Isard's Revenge. You get introduced again to Prince Admiral Dalek Krenel and his ambitious sort of point of view. And this book takes place right off the heels of The Last Command, so you won't be lost for an instant. It'll just be like a shifting of point of view from Luke to Corran. And it is an interesting thing because it ends up setting up a plot line, I guess, where Corran and the Rogues are forced to pretend that they are quote-unquote dead, so they can trick Dalek Krenel and eventually take him out. I don't want to spoil anymore because spoiling anymore, you probably wouldn't bother reading it, but I would highly recommend you do this novel as well. And from here, I would follow it up with a great comic series. I know this isn't everyone's favorite, it's not even in my top 10 EU comics myself, but I still think it's a great series because it has a lot of great story lessons, and that is the comic Dark Empire. All 3 volumes, 1, 2, and 3. Although the third one is pretty much 2 issues titled Empire's End, so go figure. I'm not going to go into detail why that trilogy kind of ended up falling apart, but the basic gist is that in this, I'm going to say it, somehow Palpatine returned. Although it's better explained here, far better explained here, and far better written here in my personal opinion. And in this story, Luke actually falls to the dark side, and Leia and the unborn Anakin Solo have to save him from that dark side. And Luke actually ends up ending a few New Republic lives while he's under Palpatine's control. So this kind of takes Luke down a bit of a darker path because he's trying to understand what brought his father to this level of power. And in my personal opinion, it does a good job humanizing Luke, because even he can fall prey to this sort of darkness. But of course, he absolutely overcomes it, and we're happy to know. Yay! Now, I would not normally recommend unofficial material to the expanded universe, but there's nothing in this material that contradicts anything that's in the expanded universe, so I'm going to go ahead and include it. If you go to Joe Bongiorno's website, you can find a digital volume titled Lightsider, and this is created as a bridge of how Cam Salusar ended up joining Luke Skywalker. And in my opinion, it is an excellently written novella by the late great Tom Veitch, who unfortunately passed away, and that's the only reason we're able to actually experience and check out Lightsider, because due to a previous falling out from Lucasfilm, he didn't want them to see a dime for this thing, which I'm kind of glad it's out there, and I'm kind of glad that they don't. After Dark Empire, another story I would recommend, sort of a side story, would be the first and probably second Crimson Empire as well. These comics are quite well written, quite well done, and it's supposed to be about one of the last Imperial guards who has a vendetta against everyone that betrayed Palpatine near the end of Dark Empire. You know, he kills a traitor guard that betrayed the rest of the guards. He that was the end. He betrays people within the Imperial Council and ranks that, you know, are trying to vie for the throne. And we get a little touch of a future threat in the future. Ooh. Next up, I would highly recommend you all check out the Jedi Academy trilogy. This trilogy is fantastic, in my opinion. It introduces so many interesting, great Jedi characters like Streen, Kip Duran, Kirana T, Tyone. But it also continues the plot lines of characters like Cam Salusar and Mara Jade, and, you know, their whole role in the Jedi Academy. And this one, believe it or not, ties into another list of recommendations if we ever get to the Old Republic. This book trilogy, Jedi Search, Dark Apprentice, and Champions of the Force, is kind of a twofold story. On one hand, it's about Luke Skywalker and his Jedi students setting up a Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, which was recommended not by Luke, but by Leia and Mon Mothma, just so we can get that detail out of the way. Because it was the original base of the Rebel Alliance. Unbeknownst to Luke, though, it is also the tomb of the ancient Sith spirit Exar Kun, and he begins to try to corrupt Luke's students and turn them to the dark side so that a new order of Sith can rise in the place of this Jedi. And the trilogy is ultimately about Luke's students learning to overcome their own personal dark sides, as well as overcoming Exar Kun. The trilogy also introduces another female baddie for the Empire in the Maw cluster, which was cut off from most of the Empire. This woman was primarily a lover of Grand Moff Tarkin, but she was also a skilled analyst and soldier in her own right, and that is Admiral Natasi Dalla. Dalla sets up a weapons division, and their whole goal, at least as far as Tarkin and Dalla were concerned, was to create a weapon more dangerous than the Death Star, and they did in the form of a small, sort of diamond-shaped craft called the Sun Crusher, which can fire a torpedo into the sun of a, or a star of a particular solar system, and destroy the entire solar system. And a big Imperial base gets wiped out. Kip Duran takes the blame for the casualties because, you know, he was under the influence of Exar Kun at the time. But, you know, it's funny how many people, omit the fact but he went to destroy the Sun Crusher, or at least make sure it was lost inside the maw, as a sort of penance. But everybody forgives that, or forgets that rather, and it's all Kip Duran's fault. He's a murderer. Blah blah blah. I'm really sick of that. But that's just my own personal beef. And as much as I do not like this novel because of how poorly it paints Luke, how poorly it paints Kip Duran, after you finish the Jedi Academy trilogy, I would recommend I, Jedi. If you're like me, it'll probably frustrate you to no end when you realize just how off the rails Corran Horn goes in this novel. Basically, his wife goes missing in this story, and he has to try and figure out where she is, but at the same time, he decides to train at Luke's academy so he can grow in his understanding and strength of the Force, and eventually he quits and leaves and goes to search for his wife, and Luke shows up and help him, and yada yada yada. It's not one of my favorites, but it did see the return of one of the characters from the X-Wing comics that Michael Stackpole had previously set up. The 14-year-old, I guess she'd be like in her 20s at this point. Young Imperial Admiral by the name of, well, technically she was a Moth, I think, because she married a Moth. Leonia Tavira. And, Corran is tempted by her, and, we get the introduction of a Kamasi great character like Eligos Akla, who ends up playing a big role later on. And basically from there, you can pretty much read any of the novels, the Callista trilogy, Crystal Star. I mean, from that, you can pretty much figure out the order, because typically in the back of the books, be it Del Rey or Bantam, they give you a sort of, like, chronology, I guess. If not, you can always find them online for the ideal place to, read books like, The New Rebellion and the Black Fleet Crisis and the Corellian trilogy. And of course, the end of the line for that, which is the Hand of Thrawn duology, which those are excellent novels. Very well done books. But anyway, this video ended up going a little longer than I intended. So, it's looking like I'm going to have to save my other recommendations for other videos. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, for tuning into my channel. Please like, share, subscribe, click the little bell, and hope to see you again next time.
Yeah.